So, J. Ruud, what lovable book are we talking about today?
Well, I'll give you a hint. Pensy Preparatory Academy in Pennsylvania.
I got books. Welcome to Between the Covers, where author J. Ruud and I, author Stacey Margaret Jones, discuss one lovable book from his list of the 100 most lovable novels in the English language every episode. And we are starting out, as usual, with the hints he gives me so that I can guess the book. Have I read this book?
You have read this book.
Oh, man, it's always so humiliating. Okay. Guess number 2, please.
Here's clue number 2. Allie's baseball mitt.
Nope.
Here's book clue number 3. Number 1 most banned book in the U.S. schools and libraries from 1960 to 1982. Each year from 1960 to 1982.
I don't know.
Can you think of any banned books?
Well, we did To Kill a Mockingbird already.
That's right. So it's not that one.
Huckleberry Finn. It's not that one.
It's not Huckleberry Finn.
I don't. Just tell me.
J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye.
Okay. All right. So J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye is our most lovable novel for today. When did this book come out?
1951.
Okay.
It was published.
How long is it ish?
214 pages.
About.
Just right around 214 pages.
All right. So what other lists has this book appeared on?
Well,
Every list ever.
a lot of them. It was on Time Magazine's list of the 100 greatest English language novels since 1923. It was on The Guardian's list of the 100 greatest English language novels. It was on The Observer's list of the 100 greatest world novels. It ranked as number 64 on the famous 1998 Modern Library list of the 100 greatest English language novels of the 20th century. And it was number 60 on the rival 20th Century's Greatest Hits that Random House, I think, put out. On the PBS Great American Read list, the novel ranked as number 30 among American voters.
Oh, okay.
It was number 24 on the Penguin Publishers 100 Must-Read Classics as voted on by their readers.
Okay.
And in the 2003 BBC Big Read, The Catcher in the Rye ranked as number 15 among British readers, which is interesting because it's a very American book, but it ranks higher among the English voters than the American ones. And maybe most impressive on the Greatest Books of the World website, which compiles an aggregate of 375 different greatest hits lists.
Right.
The Catcher in the Rye is the 4th most honored book among English language novels.
Awesome.
Trailing only Great Gatsby, Ulysses, and 1984.
What about your famous Norwegian list?
I don't think it's on that one.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I didn't mean to bring
I
up
would
the
have
sore
mentioned
spot.
it.
So can you rise to the challenge of the down and dirty summary?
Can I? Maybe. This is the story of Holden Caulfield, a 16-year-old chap who attends a boarding school in Pennsylvania. His family lives in New York. So they got a little money. And he's just been, as the book opens, he's been kicked out of school. He's failed every class except English. He has a fight with his roommate, and it's a few days before the end of the semester. So he decides, I'm getting out of here. I'm just going home and blowing this taco stand. He ends up in New York by himself, doesn't want to go home quite yet because he's afraid to face his parents. So he ends up in a hotel, does some dancing with some older women, and then when he gets up to his room, the elevator operator convinces him to get a prostitute, and turns out kind of humorously because he just wants to talk to her, and so they could charge him more money. Anyway, he thinks he's very alienated from society. Everything and everybody is a phony. He doesn't know where he's going or what he's going to do. He finally gets together with his sister, Phoebe, who's 10 years old, and he has a kind of epiphany while he's with her about what he really wants to do, which is to be the catcher in the rye, because I'm probably going to fail this short and simple explanation. Anyway, he wants to save every kid from going over a cliff. He wants to be the catcher in the rye and catch them all. And as he watches her on a merry-go-round, and all of the kids are reaching for the ring, he realizes you have to let the kid reach for the ring. You can't save them all. You can't protect them all.
Well, I got to give you a sad trombone on that. Anytime you find yourself saying, anyway, during the summary, you know it's gone south. But that does give us a very good overview of the novel. So
that was the plan.
I have read this book, but I really don't remember the specific. I mean, you talking about it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. That sounds interesting. I remember his name. I remember the tone of the book and the disaffection and the kind of searching, right?
Yeah.
Is it the, how do you say it? The Bildungsroman coming of age?
It is. Yeah, it's a coming of age novel, I guess. But you're right about the tone. That's the first thing that I think you catch in the book. This is how it starts out. If you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born and what my lousy childhood was like and how my parents were occupied and all before they had me and all that David Copperfield kind of crap. But I don't feel like going into it if you want to know the truth. So he's got that kind of cynical tone to his voice. He's got a kind of chip on his shoulder. It's a youthful voice that's full of the kind of slang that was popular among teenagers in 1951.
How old was Salinger when he wrote it? Ish.
Well, he was a veteran of World War II.
Okay.
So he was probably in his 30s, his early 30s, probably.
So he had a real ear then for something.
Yeah, for the way the kids were talking that right after the war.
What the kids are saying these days.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that if you think about it that sounds like Huck Finn. I think there's a direct connection between
I never thought of that.
The language of Huck Finn and the language, because Huck Finn speaks in this slang that's popular in Missouri in 1840. It says, you don't know me without you've read this book by a guy named Mark Twain about a guy named Tom Sawyer. It's a similar kind of youthful tone.
Well, before we go any further, I guess it's my fault. I need to clarify that we have now moved into the why is this book lovable?
Okay. Have we? Okay.
Well, I think we are. I think what you're talking about too is both Huck Finn, which I hadn't thought about. That's really something interesting to think about. Huck Finn and then Catcher in the Rye is that they feel authentic.
Yeah.
Right. If you're reading fiction to understand somebody else's point of view or to have somebody understand yours because you're like them, right? You feel seen and heard because the character in the book is like you, or you're reading it because you want to know what it's like to be them. Either way, without authenticity, there's no point, right? And it just feels like this person is just talking to you on the page.
Yeah. Well, that leads into a question of who is he talking to? And you find out as the book reaches its conclusion, this really isn't a spoiler, that he's talking to a counselor. He's talking to a psychiatrist, basically, because he's in an asylum.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is he has a breakdown. He talks about his getting sick after he met his parents. You don't get to that in the book.
Right.
But that's where he is, and you ultimately realize that by the end of the book.
Yeah.
Why do you think this novel is lovable? I mean, what do you remember about it? Did you love it when you read it?
I did love it. I will say that I think as a kind of, conventionally feminine, cisgender woman, I, I've it was interesting. I liked the style of the writing. It felt fresh to me and energetic, right? Unusual because you haven't read anything with this voice before. Maybe something like it with Huck Finn, but there's nobody like Holden Caulfield, and here's his voice. I did feel like it might be more appealing for dudes. But I'm not complaining. I really liked it. I mean, I read it quickly. I really enjoyed it. I was really taken with the writing, and I think it's really easy to go beyond the page in it. You can really envision his world and his interior life.
I mentioned it was the most banned book in America every year from 1960 to 1982. Why do you think it was so?
I don't know, because I think you should address that for us, because I don't remember what happens in it.
Well,
I remember the emotion and the tone. I don't really remember anything. I don't remember what was objectionable because I don't really remember what happened.
Part of it's the language. I mean, he does talk about all that David Copperfield kind of crap, and that's mild compared to some of the other language. There is the bit with the prostitute, which is, like I said, nothing actually happens there. But he's also, he's rebellious and he's alienated, and he thinks everybody's a phony in society. And so there's that. There's also some profanity and some actual, what you might call blasphemy, I suppose, at points when, that he thinks about God.
How old is he in the book again?
16.
He just sounds like a 16-year-old.
I know. He sounds exactly like a 16-year-old. And
timeless.
Salinger wrote the book for adults, but the character is the sort of character that every teenager wants to read about because it's themselves.
Right.
And that's why it became so popular in high schools, which is part of the reason why it was banned so much, because it was being assigned so much.
Yeah.
So while it was the number one most banned book, it was the second most assigned book in high schools in America for that whole period.
Assign it, ban it. Assign it, ban it.
Eventually, it kind of falls. It's like only the 10th most banned book in the 1990s, and then it goes down to I think like the 49th most banned book by the 2010s. I suppose because by now, the book's 70 years old, and it's maybe not as immediately accessible to. At least teachers might not think it's as immediately accessible to contemporary teenagers.
But maybe it was so influential that it's not that shocking anymore, because a lot of writers are writing like that for a teen, they're writing more authentically for a teen audience instead of didactically. They're writing descriptively, and maybe because of that book, right? Yeah.
And also things have gone a lot further now with the books that are being banned, compared to witchcraft and Harry Potter books. This is mild stuff.
Yeah.
Or same-sex kinds of relationships, even between penguins, gets you banned much more fast, much quicker than Catcher in the Rye does. But to talk about why it's lovable, this is a character that you really, as you were saying, you really kind of feel with him. A lot of people have criticized the book because they say it over sentimentalizes childhood, and they see the main motivation for Holden wanting to be the Catcher in the Rye is he wants to he's on the brink of maturity himself, and he wants to keep children in the innocence of their childhood. And that does seem kind of sentimental. And they think that his reaction is kind of overly dramatic to basically to growing up. But there's those people I don't think read the book very carefully. because
Well, that's usually what happens when I think a lot of times for critics or people who are banning something is that they don't really have an understanding of the work.
Yeah, but they're missing Allie. You know, one of the clues I gave you was Allie's baseball mitt. Back at school, the fight that he gets in with his roommate, Shackelford, is over an essay that he writes. Shackelford has got a date with this girl that Holden has always liked, so he's already mad about that.
Mm-hmm.
And Shackelford says, I'm not going to have time to write my English essay for tomorrow. Wouldn't you like to write it for me? You got nothing else to do because I'm going out with your girl, basically. Yeah. So he writes an essay about his brother Allie's baseball mitt. And Shackelford comes in and says, this is crap. I don't want it. Why didn't you write me a real essay? And he gets mad about that, and they have the fight. But Allie is his little brother who died of leukemia.
Mm-hmm.
And what's going on in the book, it seems to me, which people don't seem to realize, or at least some people don't seem to realize, is Holden's got PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
He's had to live through watching his little brother, who he was the closest to of anybody in the world, die of this lingering disease. And sure, he doesn't want kids to go through that.
Right.
That's not over sentimentalizing.
Right. He's responding to his trauma.
Yeah. And Salinger knew what he was talking about when he talked about PTSD, because in World War II, he took part in the D-Day invasion at Utah Beach. Mm-hmm. So he lived through that and then liberated Dachau.
Oh, my goodness.
And saw what happened there. And he was hospitalized after the war for PTSD because of those things. So he knew exactly what he was doing. Mm-hmm. The book is semi-autobiographical in some ways, and putting his own PTSD onto this 16-year-old who had a different kind of stress, but it was a different kind of trauma, but still the kind of trauma that would land him in a psychiatric ward.
Well, and would also make him, he's on the brink of his own adulthood.
Yeah.
And he's adult in ways he doesn't want to be yet because he's experienced this profound loss. And so you're right. I mean, it's perfectly reasonable that he would have a view of keeping children protected in a childish kind of perspective and way of life, instead of rushing forward into, this world. And then when you talk about Salinger's own experiences, being a young man in a war, why do we rush headlong into adulthood when this is the adulthood we find?
Yeah.
I mean, that explains it, I think, pretty well. I asked my students, my writing students, when we were talking about fiction, not just fiction based on their own lives, although I think most fiction, I don't know how you write fiction without basing it on something in your own experience. Even if the situation is different, there's emotion there, right? Well, what is the yearning in this novel? To me, the yearning is often the heart of the book. It's why the writer is writing. It's why the reader turns the page to find out, is the yearning satisfied, or is the yearning unmet, or is his yearning to have his brother back, or is it explicitly stated to keep other children safe and protected?
Well, I think it is a general yearning, but it's based on that specific loss. He doesn't. It's particularized also with his sister, Phoebe, who's the sibling that he has left, and wanting to protect her and wanting to keep her safe from anything.
Yeah. So he's turned his energy toward that.
Yeah.
And you can see how this would be too great of stress for a teenage boy. I mean, that seems very realistic. And I think that's what I remember about the book. It just felt very honest to me. I I didn't feel like it was over sentimentalized. So it's lovable because it's profoundly painful.
Yeah, and it's personal to me.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 15 years old, I had a friend who died of leukemia, and Holden's reaction is calm compared to mine, actually. So I don't go along with any people who find fault in the book.
So you had that happen in 1965-ish?
66. February 4th.
How old were you when you read this book?
Probably it was a year or two later.
Wow. Well, that would have I would think that would have a profound impact to read this and his perspective when you'd just gone through something kind of similar. So, it's interesting timing. Well, any other lovable notes before we get into why people, well, we've talked a little bit about it, but any other lovable notes? Because I have another.
Salinger famously became a recluse. The book gained so much notoriety, and he was very much an introvert, that he just became really reclusive after this. But famously, he never wanted the book made into a movie, even though he had people clamoring to make it a movie, including Billy Wilder, Marlon Brando, Jack Nicholson, Walt Disney. All these people were trying to get him to agree to let them make a movie out of it, but he refused. He had a short story of his made into a movie in the 1940s, and he really thought the movie sucked, and he was not going to let that happen.
That's interesting.
To Catcher in the Rye.
So it's never been a movie.
Never been a movie.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that it could be a wonderful movie, but it would be a very sharp edge. I mean, it'd be a very fine line toward being terrible. I mean, you'd have to have the exact right actor.
Yeah.
You'd have to have the exact script. Like the translation of it into film would have to be so careful and precise, I would think. But so we talked about it having been banned, but aside from that, I don't want other people to read this. Why might a reader who loves all kinds of books not enjoy this one particularly?
Well, those readers that I talked about that found it overly sentimental are people who read other books.
Sure. Right.
And I suppose if that's how they look at it, they might not like it as much.
Yeah.
Most people, this is a book that's been translated into 30 languages. By the time Salinger died in 2010, it had sold 65 million copies.
Jeez.
It's one of the best-selling books of all time. So there's a lot of love for this book out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also kind of a fast read too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very readable. The language is very accessible, and it's not long.
It's fairly short, yeah.
But it has such an intensity.
Yeah.
So makes it very memorable.
I reread it before this, and I think it took me 2 days.
Yeah. So
it goes fast.
Okay, so where are you putting it on your list?
I'm going to put
Where
this
does it rank?
This is our 20th book, by the way.
Oh, okay. That's exciting.
So I'm going to put this at number 6.
Oh, wow.
Between To Kill a Mockingbird and Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay.
Okay. So right after To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah.
All right. And I think of them as, I mentioned that as another banned book, and they're
there's some
of an era
there.
I guess. Yeah. All right.
Well, I guess it's time for Chaos Reader.
It is. All right. So I am actually reading a book that I think you must have recommended to me. It's
I did.
Elizabeth Bowen's The Death of the Heart. And it was in my to be read pile, which is basically, I don't know, it's a pile of like 60 books on my cedar chest. And I was looking for a novel because I wanted to read, I'm going to read a biography of Ruth Bader Ginsburg soon, but we were going on a trip to Italy and I did not want to lug that giant hardcover book all around. So I was looking for a novel, paperback novel, and I picked it up and I'm just 90 pages in and I'm really enjoying it. Did you read it for your list? Will you be talking about it?
Yes. No.
Oh,
it didn't make the cut.
Well,
but it is a good book.
I'm not going to read it then.
It is an excellent book.
I really enjoy the language. It's very. I like the British, kind of. Society, the 1930s, the kind of drawing room, and the British ways of socializing, etc. The class. Anytime you have anything British, class is obviously part of who's on what rung and how do they behave. And it's just kind of arch. And also there's depth there and there's already kind of things brewing. And I'm really enjoying it. I'm really eager to see what happens with it. So Elizabeth Bowen's The Death of the Heart. So that's what I'm chaos reading today.
Okay.
So this is where we ask our listeners to comment, like, share, follow, all the things. Also, we have a Facebook group. So you can find us there, Between the Covers, I think, with Jay Ruud and Stacey Jones. Or Between the Covers podcast. And you can find us there and join in any conversations about each episode as they come out. Yes.
And since Christmas is coming up.
Oh, that's right.
Wouldn't you like to give as a present Stacey Margaret Jones' novel, Mr. Catherine? It's an excellent read.
And also Jay Ruud's current Robin Hood novel, which is Treasure of Sherwood, but any of his Robin Hood novels or his Merlin Mystery novels are wonderful gifts as well. That's a great reminder. Yeah. You can find those on Amazon.
That's right.
So
Merry Christmas.
Yes.
Or it's
soon.
It'll be getting there.
All right. Well, we'd like to thank our producer, genius and mastermind Jerry Bruno for making this podcast possible. And we are not exaggerating when we say that.
No, we are not.
All right. So we'll see you next week on Between the Covers.